Rents are soaring, evictions are on the rise, and more Quad Cityans can't afford to keep their homes.
When it comes to housing, the Quad Cities is in crisis and starting to have a real impact on our communities.
TV6 peeled back the layers of the problem, talking to experts, analyzing data, and combing records back to the Great Depression.
So the big question, where are we now, and what struggles are residents facing? TV6 Investigates Matt Christensen brings us part one of our series, No Place to Call Home.
I love you. Yes, I do.
Jeannie Souza is 73 and deaf, and she and her therapy dog Lily are about to lose their Davenport apartment.
I want to stay here. I want them to leave me alone. I'm just getting comfortable. I still got stuff to unpack. And plus I have empty boxes in the bedroom. So me and the dog will sleep out here. I'm afraid somebody will come in.
Jeannie is one of the thousands of Quad Cityans on the brink of homelessness. Across the Quad Cities, rents are skyrocketing and affordable housing is disappearing. The Quad Cities is in a housing crisis, and if action isn't taken now,
you're going to see a lot more people living unsheltered. I mean, it's going to turn more into like a Chicago, like a Seattle, where there's people outside and they're just living. Nobody wants that. I mean, it's not good for the person, it's not good for our businesses, it's not good for our community.
Ashley Velez is the executive director of Humility Homes and Services, a nonprofit housing group. She says barriers are keeping people from the help they need.
So you've got people that are kind of stuck in this generational poverty cycle. You also have individuals like that haven't had the support to know where to go and to work into the different systems. It's also very difficult if you're a prideful person to, say like, I can't do this, like I need assistance.
As part of TV6's investigation into the housing crisis, we analyzed data from public and private sources. The numbers paint a grim picture. Quad Cityans are earning more money, but not enough to keep up with exploding rent. Today, median renters in the Quad Cities pay about $800 a month, but they earn just $12 an hour. Leslie Kilgannon is the executive director of the Quad Cities Housing Cluster, a group dedicated to solving the housing crisis.
As we've emerged from the pandemic and are in this new stage, we're seeing more and more people fall into housing instability. And as rents increase, as mortgage rates increase, a lot of options of affordability are no longer available to a larger swath of people. So we're just talking about it impacting our entire community in a myriad of ways.
A recent report from the cluster identified another major problem. The Quad Cities has lost a staggering 30% of its affordable housing since 2010. Older homes tend to contain lead. Boilers need to be replaced. Foundations need to be repaired. Houses simply become too expensive to fix. The Quad Cities need 6,500 more units on the market to accommodate the 12% of households that make less than $21,500 a year.
For starters, we don't have a large stock of available housing that's safe, decent, and affordable. We have units that are offline. Either people have been priced out of it, so they can't afford those units, and those aren't available to them, or those houses have gone offline. Literally, they are unavailable because they're dilapidated, abandoned, not taken care of, so they're off the market to rent or purchase.
It's a spiraling crisis that affects everyone in the Quad Cities, not just the poor. Growing research shows that communities that lack affordable housing struggle to attract workers. Economies stall, schools suffer, even rates of disease increase. In the Quad Cities, women, minorities, and the disabled are at particular risk of losing shelter. People like Jeannie.
It's really hard for me to move because I have congestive heart failure and AFib, and my knees are just together, there's no jelly in there. And for me to up and move, I can't do it. I can't even find anybody to help me do it. What day?
Yeah.
The third.
Davenport resident Jeannie Souza was on the brink of an eviction. Facing a notice to vacate her apartment in a dispute with her landlord over her therapy dog, Jeannie was desperate and losing hope.
What are they going to do? Pick me up and throw me in the street? I can barely walk. I thought about ending it, but I don't want to do that.
With just days to spare, Jeannie found new shelter at a senior living complex in Rock Island. She's one of the lucky ones. On a Tuesday afternoon in the Scott County Courthouse, dozens of people nervously await their fates. It's eviction court, and most are about to lose their homes. Davenport has the 44th highest eviction rate in the country, according to a database of public records. Scott County recorded 256 evictions in January, the highest monthly total ever. That's on pace to more than double the total evictions from last year, when 1,462 were recorded. Scott County is on pace for more than 3,000 evictions this year. Experts say escalating poverty is at the heart of the issue. Nick Smithberg is the executive director of Iowa Legal Aid, a nonprofit whose clients include those facing eviction.
It becomes a dynamic where the poverty causes people to experience evictions, but then evictions also cause poverty. So it's a very dangerous cycle, because once people do get evicted, their chances of continuing with stable income or getting suitable housing go way down.
As local poverty rates increase, so is the cost of rent. The median Quad Cities renter makes about $12 an hour, but they need to make $15 to avoid paying more than 30% of their income on rent for a median $800 apartment. All told, rent in the Quad Cities is up 23% in the past decade.
I certainly think that there have been some examples that we've seen where some larger out-of-state landlords come in, maybe with an eye towards sort of maximizing profit on properties and driving up the rents.
It's leaving thousands of Quad Citians with impossible choices.
You're seeing more people fall into housing instability. You're seeing more Americans, more Quad Citians who can't afford a $500 emergency bill. It's a difference between paying the rent, fixing their car, getting groceries.
The consequences are dire. Evictions increase homelessness and are tied to higher rates of disease, assaults, and deaths. And eviction rates in Davenport are only getting worse, at least double the rates in neighboring Moline and Rock Island. Why the discrepancy? It may have something to do with the court system, experts say.
Well, it functions as what they call sort of like a cattle call, where a lot of people come in at a short period of time and are called up to the magistrates. There's two daises where people are speaking, and so it can be a pretty busy environment, sometimes sort of hard to hear. They go through a pretty high volume of cases in a relatively short period of time.
Scott's the only large county in Iowa to handle evictions this way. But the courts aren't the only problem, housing advocates say. Laws need overhauled so tenants and landlords have more equal rights. Ashley Velez is the executive director for Humility Homes and Services, a nonprofit housing group.
We've got to look at changing some of our eviction laws, or changing how that goes, having, some mediation before landlords go, maybe incentivizing a landlord.
While Scott County's eviction system presents challenges, the county also has a history of inequity when it comes to certain neighborhoods. A look at the economic labeling that dates back to the 1930s, but is still evident today, in my next report. In Scott County, Matt Christensen, TV6 Investigates. The stroke of a red pen in the 1930s launched decades of discrimination in Davenport neighborhoods. Across the country, leaders in real estate at the time drew lines around neighborhoods to determine which could qualify for federal loans. Red lines were drawn around mostly black neighborhoods.
They grade neighborhoods from red to green, kind of stop and go. And red, just like a traffic signal, means stop. So they were not insuring loans or offering mortgages in those neighborhoods.
With no way to borrow money, people couldn't fix, buy, or rebuild homes, setting in motion generations of neighborhood poverty in redlined districts. Some 90 years later, redlined areas in Davenport are still among the poorest in the city. Using files from the National Archives, the University of Richmond compiled these maps based on actual redlining data from the time. Here's Davenport's map. Let's get right into a neighborhood here, D2. This is a neighborhood downtown. Here's Gaines Street, here's Harrison Street, here's the west end of downtown. You can pop in and see what city leaders at the time actually said about the districts and why they would not be given loans. So no loans in this D2 district here. It also extends up north. Here's St. Ambrose University. This is a neighborhood just south of that. Here's 5 Points, all in the same descriptive area. Let's go down to another one, another D district. This one near the village of East Davenport. You can click in and see what it says here. Again, no loans in this district. Let's take a look right next door though. Here's Jersey Ridge. This is McClellan Heights. You can see here, it's one of the most desirable neighborhoods in Davenport. Highest rating on the map, today still one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the city. That's not true for these D districts. Today, in the village of East Davenport, the average black resident makes about $30,000. The average white resident makes about $52,000. Other discriminatory consequences are also evident from the practice.
Issues of generational wealth and racial inequity are completely bound up in the story about where we are in evictions today, and this goes back many years.
Nick Smithberg is the executive director of Iowa Legal Aid, whose clients include those facing eviction. The group overlaid a map of evictions from last year with neighborhoods redlined in the 30s. There's a clear correlation. Racial gaps in Davenport housing are only getting worse. Black homeownership is down 15% since 2010, and today, only about 30% of Davenport's black residents own their own home. It's more than 70% for whites, according to census data.
This goes back decades in terms of favoring one neighborhood over another and putting resources and opportunities into those communities. So it's not just a story about right now. It's a story that's been going on for many years.
Reporting in Davenport, Matt Christensen, KWQC, TV6 Investigates.
When I was pregnant with the triplets, I became homeless. Kind of living with a friend, living out of my car.
Casey Utter was about to give birth. Already a mom to 2 kids, she was terrified, alone, and unsure how she would cope with triplets on the way.
I got this apartment. It took probably 8 or 9 months to get this apartment. I was calling them all the time, like, hey, you have an apartment ready? I'm pregnant, homeless. They didn't care. I guess I'm on a waiting list.
Just after the babies were born, the Moline Housing Authority found her an apartment in its public housing neighborhood, a former military barracks off 41st Street. Today, she lives in a cramped 2-bedroom with her 6 children, all under 6. Though the plaster's crumbling, the apartment is tidy and organized, but there's barely room to walk.
I have those 3 in one room, him and his older brother in the other room. This is where we sleep. Me and him, this is where we sleep.
There's more than 1,000 people on a waiting list for public housing in Moline, so for now, Casey will have to make do. John Afun is the president of the Moline Housing Authority, which oversees public housing in Moline.
So therefore, the shelter, which is a basic home, is the beginning of progress for our society. If we neglect that, we are setting up ourselves for failure.
The units come with conditions. Tenants must be able to pay rent, have decent credit, and pass a criminal background check. But even for tenants who meet those guidelines, it's very hard to obtain a unit. Larger apartments like the one that Casey wants are even harder to come by. Government housing guidelines say a family of 6 would need a 4-bedroom apartment, but there are so many on the list. There's a larger demand for bigger units than there is for smaller ones like 1- or 2-bedroom apartments. Building an apartment at a time isn't doing much to solve the housing crisis. Instead, housing advocates are calling for systemic change that starts at home.
The change must come from a local political level. I strongly, strongly believe that. The cities must put effort in ensuring that there's enough money invested in development of housing.
Back in Casey's apartment, the triplets play on the floor. With no one to watch the kids, Casey has hardly left her apartment in months.
I rarely go out because I have my car that I had only fits 3 of my kids, so I don't get to go out. I do online shopping, it gets delivered here.
Casey lost a job because she doesn't have childcare, so now she relies on government benefits from the disabled triplets. She's stuck in a cycle common in public housing projects. Casey wants to work, but she doesn't have childcare, and she can't get childcare because she doesn't work. And even if Casey did have a good job and could leave public housing, she'd likely have trouble affording a larger apartment without continued assistance. She'd have to make at least $33,000 to afford essentially the same apartment, a 2-bedroom, on the regular market, according to local housing analysts. Casey doesn't see that in her near future, so for now, she'll stay in the cycle.
My mom stays on the Iowa side, and she works. My stepdad works, so they're not able to get over here very often. So it's just me.
Reporting in Moline, Matt Christensen, KWQC, TV6 Investigates.